Dodgers have won it all. High fly ball into right field. She is gone. He struck him out. 2 balls and a strike to count on Taylor. Reyes fires, swinging a drive, deep left field. It's his way back. Walk the ball. Chris Taylor.
What's up, everybody? Welcome into DodgerHeads Live, presented by DodgerBlue.com, part of the Blue Wire Podcast Network. My name is Jeff Spiegel. 3-person show today. Matthew Moreno, Blake Williams, the heavy hitters out for tonight's show. And it has to be 3 of us because we're talking, Blake, about the first place Dodgers, baby. A 4-2 week, tied for first place in the National League West. Blake, a week ago, I said it was a hot take that the Dodgers would be fine. Now they're in first place. Nothing to worry about, right?
Yeah, I mean, it was still a little concerning. Their offense didn't really show up too much against the Cardinals, and the Cardinals have been playing very poor baseball recently. So you'd like to see them score a little more. Their pitching has been a disaster. So with the offense scoring 1 run a day ago and then a few runs today on like weak contact and ground outs, it's just you want to see more from them with the talent they have, but it's hard to complain too much after a sweep. So.
Yeah, come on, Moreno. We get productive outs today. Just like we're scoring on ground outs, we're scoring on wild pitches. Just a little small ball, which I know you of all people loves, and Blake's over here saying it's not good enough for him.
Yeah, I know. I'll bring some optimism. First, we could start by saying I told you guys they were going to play 650 baseball, and they're 6-2 since that point. And also, I think we need to give a special recognition to Austin Barnes and Chris Taylor, 2 guys that were key to wins this weekend, and I know you've been waiting to be able to say that.
Yeah, it was on my list. I wasn't sure if we were going to get to that one or not tonight, so I'm glad we got that out of the way early on. Yes, these guys love giving me crap about Austin Barnes having the RBI in the 1-0 victory, and then Chris Taylor having an RBI double the day after I condemn him for hitting cleanup, which, that game didn't go super well. We want to gloss over the fact that Chris Taylor didn't do well in that one, but the Dodgers do win. They are 4-2 this week. They sweep the Cardinals. If our friend Daniel was here, he would have a broom. So apologies to Daniel that we didn't bring a broom with us. Dodgers, though, have now won 6 of their last 8. They are tied for the lead in the National League West. So with 3 games against the Phillies coming up, which we will get to, there's reason for optimism. There's reasons for hope. So here's the plan for tonight's show. We're going to talk a little bit about Noah Syndergaard. He pitched today, and I would classify it as another concerning Noah Syndergaard start. We'll get into that. We'll talk about Gavin Stone, one of the Dodgers' top prospects, who's expected to be called up this week. Are those 2 things related or unrelated? Next, we'll talk about the offense. I want to chat with you guys about what is the Dodgers' best lineup as guys are starting to, normally I would say healthy, but come back from paternity leave is really the most important contribution that the Dodgers have had. The lineup, to me, I feel like I have a much better sense today than I did a week or 2 weeks ago about what the lineup could look like. I'm more optimistic about that. So we'll talk about the ideal lineup, specifically the outfield: Trace Thompson, Jason Hayward, David Peralta, even a little bit of Michael Busch. And then finally, we'll talk about the bullpen. Is the bullpen back? There has been some optimistic moments, although I joked that right when I logged in here, the very first comment that was posted, hours ago was basically pessimism and not impressed by what's going on. So we'll talk about all of that, but let's do this. We've got a super chat, which is an interesting one. So Michael, we appreciate you sharing this one and contributing here. Michael wants to know, normally we'd save questions for the end, but hey, if you want to make a super chat and we'll get to it as quickly as we possibly can. He wants to know about Edward Olivares and whether or not this is a trade target. He says, looks ready to break out right now, can actually hit lefties a bit. Royals have a logjam in the outfield right now, and he will be under control too. So we've got Edward Olivares, 27-year-old, right-handed hitting outfielder from the Kansas City Royals. Blake, I know you've done a little digging on our guy Olivares here. What do you think about Michael's suggestion? Is this the type of player that the Dodgers should be targeting?
Yeah, he's an interesting player. I'm just not sure he's a great fit for the team right now. He hit lefties very well last year. This year, he struggled a bit more versus them. So kind of like a Trace Thompson situation where he's hit lefties well in the past, struggled against them this year. But the main problem is he's more of a DH, in my opinion. He's in the 1st percentile of outfielder jump, in the 6th percentile of outs above average. So it's kind of hard to stick him out there in the outfield and try to hide him. Like, you can't shift as much anymore, and defense matters more now. And they already have JD Martinez as their DH. So I just don't really see a clear fit for him. I'm sure they can probably find a cheap outfielder who can hit lefties because there's a lot of them. They just have to find the one that works for them.
Yeah, Matt, what's interesting here when I look at this, I mean, again, Blake and I are big fan graphs, baseball savant guys. He's in the 96th percentile for expected batting average, 90th percentile for expected slug. So he obviously can hit. If I zoom this out a little bit, Matt, what do you think about just the idea of the Dodgers already talking trade? We know that most of these trades will not happen until closer to the deadline, and we're going to get into Trace Thompson and Jason Hayward and David Peralta, but I'm curious, like, should the Dodgers feel some sense of urgency to try and get a deal done sooner rather than later in the outfield?
I think it wouldn't hurt, and it's obviously, it would be uncommon and unprecedented. I think for Andrew Friedman, he like most other GMs or president of baseball operations tend to wait until closer to the trade deadline. But if you're the Dodgers, if the Olivares specifically, some of his batted ball profile is intriguing. I know that certainly there are concerns with the outfield stuff. But if, they could get him on a relatively, I don't want to say cheap, team friendly type deal, and it's not, you're not giving up a ton and you kind of jump ahead of the market. Yeah. And even with some of his struggles against lefties, if you hope that, last year will kind of show through at some point, it could make sense. And whether it's him or another outfielder that Blake alluded to that can hit lefties, I don't see why not. Like we've discussed on our other shows, their margin for error this season isn't as big. And so you can't really sit as comfortably and just say, hey, we can wait 3 months and wait to see if something improves or, whatever may come up. Because, if you do that, who knows where you're going to kind of be standing in terms of the playoff picture.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And again, later on in this show, we will talk a little bit about the outfield, because as much as we sit here and say, hey, the Dodgers could use an outfielder to hit left-handers, they have a ton of outfielders on the roster. There aren't really room for more outfielders on the roster. And so we'll get to Trace Thompson, Jason Hayward, David Peralta, among others, as well as Mookie Betts. Should he be playing shortstop or should he be in the outfield conversation? So Michael, again, thanks for the super chat. We greatly appreciate it. And if you do have a question you desperately want answered and you want to throw it up as a super chat, we will get to it. Otherwise, we'll save some time at the end of the show to answer some questions there. But guys, let's shift to the pitcher who was on the mound for the Dodgers today, and that's Noah Syndergaard. I think safe to say the most polarizing pitcher that the Dodgers have right now. Kershaw has been really good. I think Julio has been somewhat polarizing just because of the impending free agency. Dustin May has been pretty good, and Tony Gonsolin is relatively new to being back, so not enough time for him to be polarizing. But Matt, when I look at Noah Syndergaard, just a bizarre start, I would say, today. He strikes out 0 players in 5.1 innings. He has just 3 whiffs all day. So 32 times players swung at pitches that he threw. Just 3 times did they miss. The sinker, the cutter, and the fastball all had no whiffs on them. He allowed 10 hard hit balls. His final line, 5 1/3, 8 hits, 3 earned, no walks, no strikeouts. What do you make of Syndergaard both today and maybe bigger picture, Matt? Like, is the sample size large enough where you're concerned?
It's tough to say, because I think where it has to start and for where the conversation needs to begin is, what are your expectations for him? And on one hand, I know, like, when we were, texting about him today, I was, half joking, like, hey, like, he sort of keeps giving them quality starts by definition. But if you look at kind of the context and dig into those starts, like, they're not necessarily too encouraging. And honestly, I think his outing against the Cardinals is the most concerning he's had. And that's taking into account the 7 runs he just gave up to the Pirates, his last time out before today. Not getting swing and miss, his fastball velocity, I wasn't counting on that to bounce back. But if there's, literally like no separation between that and a changeup, like, you're really in trouble. So all that being said, I think there's reason for concern, and I view him as, basically a 5th starter who kind of needed to be sort of league average, but I don't think what they're getting from him is league average.
Yeah, I mean, Blake, you look at sort of the traditional metrics on Syndergaard, and it's not great. The strikeouts per 9 is just 7.27. The walk rate has been pretty good, but at the end of the day, it's an ERA over 6.5 this season. Blake, there were people that were skeptical about the Syndergaard move coming in. He kept talking about getting back to 100-mile-an-hour fastball. He gave that up pretty quickly. He's nowhere close to that. He does throw strikes, but 10 hard hit balls and just 3 whiffs today. That's not the type of ratio that you want, even out of your number 5 starter.
Yeah, it's definitely concerning. I'll give him some credit. The Cardinals are a very scrappy team that makes a lot of contact and gives pitchers a hard time always. But still, going 5+ innings in 2023 without getting one strikeout, that's pretty impressive in its own self, and not in a good way, of course. So they definitely need him to figure something out, whether it's throwing the curveball more, which I think he did a bit today to just get some more separation in the velocity of his pitches, or something. He can't keep doing this. Once he starts facing better lineups, he's going to need to get more strikeouts, or they're going to take advantage of that and capitalize more. So maybe Gavin Stone ends up being that guy who kind of takes over for them and they move on. But at this point, they do need more from him, and they can't keep going forward with him not getting any strikeouts or whiffs.
I mean, Blake, just to piggyback on that, how do you see, like, if this keeps up for another 4 or 5 starts, how does this play out? He doesn't seem to have the stuff that's going to play up in the bullpen. Do you think he has value around the league given with the state of starting pitching, or is this just going to be a DFA, eat the contract, and move on?
Some team might give up something for him if the Dodgers really want to just move on from him. I mean, teams always are looking for pitchers, and especially if they're going to eat like half the contract or something. But he did also pitch out of the bullpen last year in Philadelphia, and then he was a little better. It wasn't great, but he was effective. So maybe I can kind of find a role for him there. But yeah, at this point, they just need more from him. It's not enough right now.
Matt, what do you think? It looks like he made 2 appearances through 2 innings out of the out of the bullpen, no earned runs. So there you go. He had a 0.00 ERA as a relief pitcher last year. But how do you see this playing? I see some people in the chat. James says, "Hey, give him until Memorial Day, which is like 4 weeks from tomorrow, and then DFA him if you can't." How do you see this playing out?
I don't know if the DFA route is what the Dodgers will do, just because he's making a decent amount in terms of salary to just sort of eat. And I think maybe they would try the bullpen before sort of doing anything. I'm skeptical on what a team may be willing to trade for him. I mean, maybe you get kind of a low A prospect from somebody, but if he's, I mean, his ERA, if it's, I know it's not the end all be all, but if it stays, his underlying metrics aren't there, and so then if his ERA and all that other stuff is inflated as well, like how are you going to sort of sell him to another team? And that's always like the ironic thing when we get tweets from people like, oh, he's so bad, they should trade him. It's like, well, if you're saying this guy is really bad, like who do you think is going to want to trade for him? Yeah. I think maybe in the bullpen, if you put him there and you tell him, hey, like you're only going to pitch, one inning, maybe get 4 outs here and there, maybe his velocity ticks up a few miles an hour if he knows he could, sort of let it rip. But I mean, even that would be kind of best case scenario.
Yeah, as of now, he's in the bottom third of all pitchers in expected batting average, expected slugging percentage, whiff rate, and strikeout rate, just to give you a sense. So briefly, Matt, any optimism that this thing turns around for Thor, or are we kind of seeing the guy that is this going to be a guy whose ERA starts with a 5 for the entirety of the season?
Yeah, I would be surprised if he gets it under 5 at this point, just because I don't know if he'll be able to string enough consistent starts together to get it low enough. And I think it's just like I said, he's a number 5 starter, but he's not a number 5 starter that the Dodgers are used to, frankly. Like that has worked out very well for them in the past, and it just isn't so far with Syndergaard.
Blake, what about you? You think he gets the ERA under 5 at any point?
I would say, like, from here on out, he could pitch at that level of being under 5, like a mid-4 ERA pitcher. But like as Matt said, I'm not sure he can actually get it under 5 right now just because of the starts he has had. But like if we're talking about starting in his next start and moving forward, I could see it. It wouldn't totally surprise me. I'm not expecting it, but that's just the state of him right now.
I mean, it's crazy. This guy threw 134 and 2/3 innings last year and a 3.94 ERA. The FIP was 3.83. So I mean, he wasn't to think. Normally, these guys get better when they come to the Dodgers. They don't get worse. In possibly related, possibly unrelated news, though, there is a pitcher who is on his way to Los Angeles. It's a guy that many folks have been clamoring for, I would say, for a long time, and that is Gavin Stone. If you're unfamiliar with Gavin Stone, he's a 24-year-old. He was a 5th-round pick of the Dodgers out of Central Arkansas back in 2020. Last year, he made 25 starts across a couple minor league levels, 1.48 ERA, striking out 168 in 121.1 innings. He's the number 4 prospect in the organization, according to most people, if you include Miguel Vargas, Bobby Miller, and Cartaya, the 3 guys that were ranked ahead of him. But one of the things that jumps out, he was a top 60 prospect on every single list out there. Sometimes you see these guys who are like, on some lists and not on others. He was top 60 by Baseball America, Baseball Prospectus, MLB Pipeline, The Athletic, ESPN, and Fangraphs. He was with the Dodgers in camp. He pitched pretty well. There were people saying, hey, put this guy on the opening day roster. And then he gets sent down to AAA and got shelled. 2 innings, 6 earned in his first start of the season at AAA. But since then, 22 innings pitched, 24 strikeouts, a 2.86 ERA. So, Blake, what do we do? Is Gavin Stone's, is this call-up related to the Noah Syndergaard? I mean, I say that tongue-in-cheek because the Stone move was announced, or hinted at, I should say, prior to Syndergaard struggling today. But do you think 2 weeks from now, these two moves become far more related than maybe we realize at the moment?
I don't think so. When Dave was talking about it today, he wouldn't confirm that they're calling up Stone because they haven't made it official yet. But he pretty much hinted at it would just be a spot start kind of thing to give guys an off day. And then it was pointed out to him that they also have an off day on Thursday. So Dave didn't really go too much into that, but it seems more just like they want to give their guys a break a little more than something that we're going to see permanent. Maybe if he impresses, he'll have to force his way onto the roster. But I think for now, it's more just kind of seeing what he has. And then maybe in a few weeks, they consider moving on from Syndergaard and going with Stone, or if there's an injury that comes up, Stone could push his way back in. But just right now, it seems more like a spot start.
The 6-man rotation thing did make me laugh. They had an off day last Monday. They have another off day this Thursday. So they have 9 games in 9 days with an off day on either side. And then right in the middle, apparently, they decide to go to a 6-man rotation. Matt, what did you make of it? Because while I was super excited about Stone being called up, I think he is probably the 5th best pitcher that the Dodgers currently have in their organization as far as guys that can contribute at the major league level. I also don't totally understand why and how all of this is going to fit together.
Yeah, I'm with you. I was surprised by it, and I feel like if they were going to make this decision, why not do it last week when instead of rushing Gonsolin back after just one rehab start? Like, in my opinion, if it is only going to be a spot start for Stone, they should have let him face the Pirates, let Gonsolin make a second rehab start, and then slot Gonsolin back into the rotation again when you need your 5th starter. Maybe that's not what they're doing as much as Dave is, kind of trying to play coy. It could be a matter of, they want to see how Stone handles it and also have the conversation with Syndergaard rather than, potentially something getting out through the media. And then that's how Noah ends up finding out about it. But, if it is truly just a spot start to buy them some extra rest, I think it's a little curious of a strategy to do now, considering, like you said, how the breaks in the schedule that have already come for them.
Yeah.
I guess another thing too, another way to look at it is it bumps Dustin May back to facing the Padres this weekend. So maybe that was a factor as well. And Dave didn't necessarily want to, get out publicly and say we're trying to, line guys up for the Padres series. But yeah, it's a curious decision all the way around. But, an exciting one, obviously, for Stone. And I think it's Michael Grove, if I'm not mistaken, made his MLB debut against the Phillies last year as well. So it's kind of funny to see that parallel.
Yeah, and look, it is worth pointing out that while most people will learn about this move on Tuesday or Wednesday when he actually gets sort of announced, the rumors were reported on Saturday. I believe it was it Juan Toribio that had it first, and then Fabian Ardaya confirmed it. But so this all happened before Syndergaard starts. So as much as I sort of tongue-in-cheek connect those two things, had Syndergaard gone out and absolutely shoved today, you wouldn't have been able to connect those because the Stone thing still definitely would have happened on Wednesday by all accounts. Real quick, Blake, we talk about he's a top 60 prospect. Obviously, he was a guy coming out of college in 2020, so he's a little bit older. Is he ready? 24-year-old, just drafted 2 years ago. I mean, is this guy ready to dominate? Is this guy ready to be a 4.5 ERA pitcher? Where's he going to shake? How's this going to shake out?
I think he's ready to be competitive at the very least, which we can't really say about Syndergaard at this point. So that's an upgrade there. The Dodgers don't really rush prospects. They always make sure to hold them back until they're fully ready to go. So I have faith that he's going to be effective and come up and be ready and prepared, because that's just what they're good at. We see it all the time. It's happened over so many years now. So yeah, I have faith in him. I'm just not sure we're going to come up and see a 2.5 ERA or anything like that.
Yeah. And Matt, I mean, what do you think? Does it feel like, is this just going to be one start and then he gets sent back down for another month or two? How do you see that piece playing out?
Yeah, it wouldn't shock me if he makes the one start, excuse me, and then they give, another 2 or 3 weeks and then reevaluate, maybe where things are with Syndergaard, as much as they might not be connected, might be connected, whatever the case is, and then potentially give Stone another call. I think what'll be interesting too is, the Phillies have some hitters in the lineup, and Bryce Harper may be coming back as well. So it's kind of it could be a, hey, go get him, kid. Like,
Yeah.
facing some sluggers, but I think, like Blake said, he'll at the very least be competitive, and similar to what Michael Grove and Ryan Pepio did, I think last year. They had some of their fair share of struggles, but there were also moments where they sort of held their own against an opponent. I think Stone will do the same.
Yeah, and it's worth noting Stone comes in with a much higher pedigree than Pepio or Grove did. I mean, especially Grove. Pepio is kind of a fringe top 100 guy, whereas Stone, I think a lot of people, like I said, have him as a top 50, top 60 guy. I can't ask Blake this question because it hits a little too close to home, Matt, but one of my bold predictions was that Miguel Vargas would finish third on the Dodgers in National League Rookie of the Year voting. I think we're safe to say Outman is a little bit ahead of him. This feels like, Matt, we might be on the road to that bold prediction, might potentially be coming true. And that's not even a diss on Miguel Vargas. I said at the time it has way more to do about what I think with what I think about James Outman and Gavin Stone. But Matt, him coming up this early, who knows? He hasn't missed a ton of time as a starting pitcher to kind of insert himself into that conversation.
Yeah, potentially. I mean, if he sticks, by middle of the season and then is up for the rest of the year, I could see him entering that conversation. But also, I think Vargas is going to start improving on his early showing and get back into that conversation. Maybe.
Yeah, Blake, you want to comment here, or you going to let Miguel Vargas's bat wake up and then start doing the talking here?
I mean, I have all the faith in Miguel Vargas. He's really talented. It just hasn't gone well for him to start the year, whether that's related to the injury or just some unlucky outcomes and maybe just getting off track a little. But he's a really good player, and I think we're going to see him do better as well.
Yeah, no, I agree. And again, let me be clear. I am not anti-Miguel Vargas. I am pro Miguel Vargas, pro James Outman, and pro Gavin Stone. And that's just a bold prediction that I made. But let's shift to the offense. And I want to ask you guys the question of what is the Dodgers' best lineup? We've joked about, guys that are on paternity lists. Max Muncy was gone for a little while. Will Smith was on the injured list for a little while. Obviously, Rojas is on the injured list, expected to come back. JD Martinez is on the injured list, expected to come back, not any, in a week or so. There have been a lot of moving pieces. Mookie Betts is playing right field, then he's playing center field now, shortstop. You got James Outman, who was a platoon guy and now is an everyday. I feel a lot better about being able to say what the Dodgers' best lineup is, but I'm curious if we all agree on that. Now, I think we all agree on this. I think there's like 7, maybe even 8 positions that we all agree on. So I think Will Smith at catcher. Matt, do you want to make an Austin Barnes case here over Will Smith at catcher, or?
Will Smith can be the regular catcher. Austin Barnes is a superior backup.
Okay, perfect. Will Smith at catcher, Freddie Freeman at first. I think we all would agree that Miguel Vargas is playing second base. Max Muncy is playing third base. I'll save JD because that might be a different one. So we've got catcher, first base, second base, third base. And then I think James Outman in center field. I would say those positions, does any disagreement on those players at those positions, Matt or Blake?
I think Dave has some disagreement about Outman in center because every time Trace or Hayward's in the lineup, you usually see Outman slide over to left.
Okay, but I'll rephrase. Outman is an everyday outfielder, and you can figure out the position. So those 5 were agreed on. Let's go to JD Martinez. I know people have all sorts of issues with JD Martinez, the person. Does anybody want to make the case that JD Martinez is not the best option the Dodgers have at designated hitter?
I think he is, but it's a lot of that is he started to hit better of late, so I will give him that. But also, like, the Dodgers signed him for that role, so like it's tough for me to say, like, if you take him out of there, then you're basically, but you would potentially be looking at a scenario where you're paying JD Martinez and Noah Syndergaard to, sort of do nothing.
Yeah.
And so, considering that that's the case, I'm fine leaving JD as the DH.
Blake, any issues with JD at DH?
No, I don't think he's amazing or great, but he's pretty much doing what we expected and what they signed him for, so can't really complain.
And I would add, when we get to the guys who are just going to miss our 9 starting players, I think it's safe to say JD Martinez comfortably better than all of those guys as far as an option goes. Michael Busch, maybe the one guy that you could make a compelling case for, but as we'll talk about, we haven't really seen it. So the other name that we're all going to agree on is Mookie Betts. What we may not agree on is what position Mookie Betts should be playing. I think you could make a pretty compelling argument that the best lineup that the Dodgers could put out there, I'm talking combination offense and defense, is actually Mookie Betts at shortstop, because I think they have better options in the outfield than they do in the infield, a la Miguel Rojas and Chris Taylor. And also long-term, although that's not what we're talking about right now, I think it's much easier to find an additional bat in the outfield, much less expensive to find an outfield bat than it is a bat at shortstop. So Blake, I'll let you respond first. In my best Dodgers lineup, Mookie Betts is playing shortstop. Do you agree or disagree?
I think that's fair for now until they go trade for Tim Anderson.
Okay.
So, yeah.
As
I'll
constructed,
say
though,
I'm
you're
short.
agreeing with me.
Yeah, I think right now.
Okay. Moreno?
Yeah, I agree, but I think it still needs to be capped at like 4 or 5 times a week that he's playing shortstop, because I do have some concerns over how like physically demanding that position can be.
Okay, so we all agreed then. There we go. I like this. Mookie at shortstop. So that leaves us with 3 players for 2 outfield spots. As we said, James Outman can play any of the 3 outfield spots, so we don't have to place players in specific spots. I think all of the guys we're going to mention, with the exception of David Peralta, can probably play just about anywhere pretty comfortably. So that leaves us with Trace Thompson, David Peralta, Jason Hayward, and as I said, we'll mention Michael Busch a tiny bit at the end. Let me just give you some numbers on these 3, and then Matt, I'll let you respond first. So Trace Thompson, not in an awesome stretch of baseball at the moment. They put this stat up in the broadcast, and it blew my mind. After today, he is now 1 for his last 26 with 17 strikeouts. That's over the last 10 days. Versus left-handed pitching, he is 2 for 28 with 15 strikeouts. Versus right-handed pitching, he is 5 for 20 with 9 strikeouts and 3 home runs. For context, he hit over 300 in 133 at-bats against right-handed pitchers last year. But the OPS looks all right because of that 3 home run game at the beginning. The OPS is at 705. So that's Trace Thompson. Next up, we've got David Peralta, who is 0 for 4 with 2 RBI groundouts today. He's 1 for his last 24, dating back to April 22nd. What he has over Trace Thompson is that he's only struck out 4 times. I don't know if that's better or worse, that he hits the ball, but that he can't get any hits. He, however, is slashing just 167 batting average, 188 on base, 227 slugging. Jason Hayward, the third candidate, he had a double and 2 walks today. He is hitting 240 with a 350 on base percentage and a 480 slugging percentage. However, he has only 3 at-bats against left-handed pitching this year, and he is 0 for 3 with 2 strikeouts in that group. Now, obviously, there's a platoon conversation to have here, but Blake, I'll start with you. You've got 2 outfield spots available to you if Mookie Betts is playing shortstop. So how are you filling those 2 spots?
Well, I do want to mention that Chris Taylor also has some ability to play outfield there. And before Miguel Rojas was thrown into the starting spot, he was going to play a bit of left field, Dave said. So you have a lot of options there. I'm just not sure any of them are great. I mean, Hayward, I think, is the best option right now. Just considering all those guys, he's actually hitting the ball hard. He can play fine defense. With the rest of them, there's some flaws in their game or just something that you don't really want them playing every day. So I'll start with Hayward as my top option for there.
Yeah, I agree with you on Hayward. Oh, go ahead.
And then I think for the other spot, it would probably just have to be a platoon with like Taylor and Peralta or Taylor and Busch or just something like that.
Okay. So, Matt, on the Hayward piece, I left this out, but it's pretty remarkable. He now qualifies for the StatCast leaderboards. He is in the 92nd percentile for exit velocity, 98th percentile for hard hit balls, and the 92nd percentile in chase rate. Every single metric on the board is top 30% in all of Major League Baseball. This is Jason Hayward, except for sprint speed and expected batting average. Expected batting average is in the 63rd percentile, which is above average, by the way. And so we'll take that in the conversation that we're having. So let me start, Matt. Is Jason Hayward like clearly and in the lineup if we're putting our best group out there? And I'll ask, would you go as far as to say, let's start getting this guy some ABs against left-handed pitching? Or do you like him just as the platoon against righties, pencil him in?
I would let him start pretty much every day, regardless of what hand the opposing pitcher is throwing with, because it's like you've seen, you've explained, we've all seen the options against left-handed pitchers aren't great. And so why not see, if Hayward can apply some of his batted ball skills to same side pitching. And if it works out, then hey, like you've kind of solved one of your outfield positions. So yeah, I think for me, if Mookie's playing shortstop, then Hayward is pretty much penciled in as the starter in right field, no matter what.
Blake, real quick, Jason Hayward against lefties. Are you ready to just say, hey, throw him out there and see what happens? He has 3 at-bats against them all season.
I think I'd slowly start mixing him in, but I don't think I'm fully ready just to say, hey, go hit every lefty. I'm sure some of his numbers are so great because they've limited him to only facing righties. Like it could be a Jock situation where if they start letting him face lefties, his numbers are going to drop a lot. So I would just kind of want to see what he has before you just hand him the full-time job.
Okay. So, Matt, back to you. We've got Hayward in one spot. You and I are both in agreement, by the way, right now, that we're playing the 8 guys we just mentioned every single day. I don't care who's on the mound, righty or lefty, hard thrower, soft thrower. I want Hayward. I want Outman. I want Mookie at shortstop, etc. Now, you said Mookie rotate around, but if we're saying our best lineup on this day, so how do you shake out that last spot? Is it Thompson? Is it Peralta? Is it Taylor? Is it Michael Busch? Is it a platoon? How do you see that last spot coming together?
Yeah, I mean, I think it basically just needs to be a platoon, and a platoon in the sense of I would have it with Trace Thompson and Chris Taylor. And
Okay.
when a right-hander is starting, let Trace Thompson just be in the lineup. Like we've seen it. They keep trying to force feed him left-handed pitching, and it's just not working out.
Yeah.
So get some production out of him when a right-hander's on the mound. And when it's a lefty, that's when you can run out Chris Taylor and hope that, some of his past success will start to come through like we saw with his RBI double today.
Yeah, and I would say too, if it gets to a point where the hitting against left-handed pitching is that bad, then those are the days, in my estimation, where you send Mookie to the outfield and you stick Miguel Rojas at shortstop and you say, all these guys suck at hitting, so at least give us the guy who's an elite defensive shortstop and an elite defensive right fielder, and we'll just take our chances. That would kind of be my approach. But I'm with you. Like, put Trace Thompson out there against righties. I know it doesn't make sense that the righty hits righties better than he hits lefties. He had over 300 against them. He has hit better against them this season. And yet, to your point, they keep throwing him out there against lefties. Blake, can you make any sense of the idea that they just refuse to admit that Trace Thompson has reverse splits?
I think to make sense of it is they just don't have any other options. So they're just kind of hoping it starts to work out. Like, you're not going to want to run David Peralta out there because he hasn't hit lefties pretty much at all in his career, and he's not hitting anyone this year. So you're just very limited in what you can do. Like, maybe you give Michael Busch a chance, but he just got called up a few days ago. So it's just the options aren't great.
Well, Blake, give me your scouting report on Michael Busch thus far. 11 at-bats, just 1 hit, 1 walk, 5 strikeouts. Pretty much what you would expect for a guy making his major league debut. Obviously, the bat is what has carried him through the minors. It's worth pointing out that last season he had an 1100 OPS against left-handed pitching down in AAA. It was basically identical against lefties and against righties. So this small sample size, to be fair. But what do you make of Michael Busch and kind of what they could expect from him?
I mean, I think he's going to be like around a 250 hitter in his career with 30 home run type power. So I'm not sure you're going to get that this year from him, but I do think he needs more consistent at bats. I don't think he should be up just sitting on the bench most days, especially when you're running out Peralta and Thompson every day. It's hard to say what he's actually going to do right now just because we haven't seen him too much. And it's always hard to project from like AAA to the major leagues just because it's so much harder. And so many guys do end up becoming like quad A players. So yeah. I do think he needs to play more though.
Okay. So let's land the plane. I'm going to answer my own question with the group that we all agree on. I want Jason Hayward playing every day against left-handed pitching who nobody can hit. Give me Miguel Rojas at shortstop. Give me Mookie Betts in the outfield. And against right-handed pitching, give me Trace Thompson. That's where I'm landing the plane. Matt, against right-handed pitching, against left-handed pitching, are you in agreement with me or would you change something?
No, I'm in agreement with you.
Okay, there we go. 2 against 1, no matter what Blake says. So I like where this is at. But Blake, give me your against righties and against lefties, because we basically agreed on 7. You only want Hayward against right-handed pitching, it sounded like. So tell me how you shake out those last 2 spots.
I think I'd let Busch see what he can do against lefties, and then I'd go with what you said at shortstop with Mookie playing there against righties, and then moving to the outfield and putting Rojas there against lefties.
Okay. There we have it. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how this all plays out. Oh, this was the last question I was going to ask. It was a bold prediction that I made, and I have seen a lot of momentum for it, not related to my prediction, but just in general of late. And that is Trace Thompson and how much longer he might be a member of the Dodgers. Obviously, there is nothing coming from the Dodgers to indicate it, but I mentioned how bad it has been. One for his last 26 with 17 strikeouts. It's worth pointing out that as good as he was in 2022, that was a dramatic outlier from the rest of his major league career. The Dodgers were his third organization just last season. So it's fair to wonder whether the Trace Thompson we're seeing right now is actually a better representation of Trace Thompson than the one we saw last year. So Matt, I'll start with you. I mean, is the DFA like, do you actually see that happening at some point, or are we still a long ways off from even considering it?
I think it's contingent on if they trade for an outfielder. If they do that, maybe they're able to include Thompson in that trade, and if not, then I think he would be DFA'd at that point so that they could make room on their roster. But other than that, I think he'll probably end up sticking around. And what's interesting too, so not to completely go back to the Michael Busch conversation, but sort of relates to something like in terms of roster spots, like Rojas is going to be back on either, probably Monday or Tuesday. So I saw JP Hoornstra reported that Austin Wynns was designated for assignment. I assume that would then be for Rojas. But then once JD Martinez is ready to come back, we're probably looking at Michael Busch being sent down unless, do the Dodgers make the decision at that point to DFA Thompson? I don't necessarily think so, because to Blake's point, I don't think we've seen enough from Busch yet to really know what you might have. So I think they'd hold on to Thompson until, they make either he's traded for another outfielder, or they acquire one and need to make room on their roster.
Yeah, and Busch is a guy they're just going to be less comfortable with sitting as much as Trace Thompson. They don't care. If Trace Thompson plays only every 3 or 4 days, as Scott Van Slyke pointed out on Twitter, if you follow him, saying that he wishes he was getting more consistent. Blake, real quick, Trace Thompson, DFA, are we a long ways off from that, or do you think that's maybe more realistic than we might have originally thought?
I agree with Matt's point that they're going to wait and see and probably end up optioning Busch, but I think Thompson is the guy I would end up DFAing if I had to make the choice. It would either be between him or Peralta. But for Peralta's credit, his batted ball profile is pretty similar to what it's been in the past. I think he's just got a bit unlucky. He does need to start hitting the ball harder a little more consistently, but that's the kind of player he is. He's not really a power guy. He's going to have a bunch of slap singles and kind of hits like that. So I think he'll start getting better results if he just keeps playing and getting more time. With Thompson, I just think it's this is what he is. He's going to strike out a lot and hit some occasional homers and just overall not be a very good player.
Yeah. I mean, again, I pointed it out. Both these guys are in dramatic slumps. Thompson 1 for 26, Peralta 1 for 24. The difference is Thompson has 17 strikeouts, Peralta 4. And you might say, who cares how they're getting out? Well, Peralta had 2 RBIs because he put the ball in play today. And so you may not love that, and it may not be sexy, but it was 2 runs in a game that they needed them. And so there is a difference between those two. Obviously you take the guy who's hitting 200 over the guy who's hitting 050 just because he isn't striking out. But when you're choosing between 2 guys that are both struggling as mightily as they are, then so be it. All right, let's move on to Blake's favorite conversation. It's the bullpen. Nothing this guy likes talking about more than relief pitchers. And I want to play a game of, do you trust blank in the bullpen? And we'll start with the top. And the premise of this is the bullpen back? Is the Dodgers bullpen back, Blake? And so I'll say a name. You tell me yes or no. Do you trust this person? I'll include some statistics to give you a sense of maybe where I am. And I'll let you go first, Blake. And then Matt, you can answer after. We'll start with Evan Phillips. 6 consecutive scoreless appearances, has only allowed runs in 1 of his last 11 appearances. He has 12 strikeouts, 2 walks, and 8 hits allowed in 10 innings pitched. I know you don't love relief pitchers, period. You actually despise them as a portion. No, I'm just kidding. But do you trust Evan Phillips, Blake, 10 innings and 11 appearances into the season?
Yes, you alluded to, I don't have any trust in relievers, but I think I trust Evan Phillips about as much as I can trust a reliever, besides maybe like an Edwin Diaz type. So yeah, I believe in him, and I think he's going to be really solid all year.
Yeah, this is graded on a curve, Blake. So whatever believe in sounds like for you, then go with that. Matt, Evan Phillips, do you trust him?
Yeah, I do. And I never really lost trust in him, even when, he sort of struggled for his standards. I think it was just, no relief pitcher is going to be perfect. Very few relief pitchers are going to be close to perfect throughout an entire year. And so I think that's kind of what we saw early this season. And now it's getting back to more of what you can consistently expect from him.
Yeah, and really, it was just one bad outing. He allowed 3 earned runs back on April 11th, and other than that, it's been scoreless all the way around. All right, second up, Matt, we'll start with you. Brusdar Graterol, 9 consecutive scoreless appearances. That's 8 1/3, 5 hits, 8 strikeouts, 1 walk over that stretch. No strikeouts, however, in his last 3.2 innings pitched. So while the scoreless stuff has been there, the strikeout popped up and then maybe started to disappear. So, Matt, do you trust Brusdar Graterol right now?
I do trust him. Daniel and I have been Brusdar Graterol proponents all year long. I will say, though, that I don't necessarily, he's not my choice, probably not my top 2 or 3 choices for like a save situation.
Okay.
I'd be a little bit more comfortable with like a 7th, maybe 8th inning type thing, but there's trust there.
Okay. Well, Blake, it's interesting because that's exactly what Graterol has been. He gets the save on Saturday and has basically been the fireman of late, it seems like, coming into big spots. So on the Blake scale of trusting relievers, where does Brusdar Graterol fall?
I trust him as a middle reliever. I don't think I have that faith in him as a high leverage guy yet, just because of the lack of strikeouts. I think to be an effective high leverage reliever consistently, you need to get a lot of whiffs and get guys to strike out, or else you're going to allow a lot of hits just over the course of a season.
Yeah, I'll say this. I trust him a lot more now than I used to. The no strikeouts over his last 3 2/3 is slightly concerning to me, but I mean, he looks really good. The breaking ball is as good as it has ever looked from Graterol. And if he can mix up pitches the way that he seems to be pitching with confidence, which guys like Graterol and Vesia, it feels like confidence matters. Like that's almost the most important factor of anything else. And so I'm in the, I trust Graterol right now. And I would say I trust him in any situation. Like I think it's him and Phillips clearly above all the rest. Well, I shouldn't say that. I think there's one more guy on my list that I would have in the top group, but I think there's 3 guys that I trust basically unequivocally, and then a bunch of guys that I have some more concerns about. So let's go to number 3. Caleb Ferguson is third on my list. Blake, I'll start with you. He's got a 1.64 ERA on the season, 8 consecutive scoreless appearances, just 4 hits allowed over that stretch, 1 walk, 8 strikeouts, pumping 97 miles an hour today against the Cardinals. Do we trust Caleb Ferguson, Blake?
Yeah, he looks like he's back to his 2020 form when he was one of the best relievers in all of baseball. So I think he's definitely earning that trust, and he would probably be my number 2 leverage guy right now.
Okay, Matt, you've got him number 2 on your list too, I imagine?
Yeah, pretty much. I'm there with Blake, and Dave mentioned Ferguson as somebody that he trusts to end games as well.
Man, Blake, he almost called you Dave Roberts there for a second. I don't know how you would have taken that, but I just want you to know that almost happened. Okay, 4th on the list. Matt, I'll come to you first. Shelby Miller. I think this is the most interesting name on the list. He's got a 1.5 ERA on the season. He has allowed no hits in his last 3 appearances, 3 strikeouts and a walk, but he does have 8 walks on the season in just 12 innings pitched, 4 hits and 10 strikeouts. So what do you make of all that, Matt? Do you trust Shelby Miller?
It's relative, but I'll lean more yes than no in, kind of the similar way that you sort of trusted Joe Kelly when he was coming into games. He's not somebody who I would do like real high leverage stuff for, but, medium leverage, I could see it.
Yeah. Blake, where are you at? Joe Kelly's quite the comp. That feels slightly insulting to the season that Shelby Miller has had, but maybe he deserves it with all the walks that I just mentioned.
I think he's kind of moving into that trust category. He's right on the fringe for me right now. His stuff is definitely good. The walks are a little concerning, but they signed him as kind of a rebuild project, and you can see why they had faith in him and believed that he could be an effective reliever. So I want to see it for a little longer, but he's definitely getting there.
Yeah. No, look, he's interesting. Again, the Joe Kelly one, it makes sense to me now. That felt insulting in the moment. I was like, geez Louise, when Joe Kelly was bad, it was like I wanted nothing to do with Joe Kelly coming into a game. And so I trust Shelby Miller more than I trusted bad Joe Kelly at the beginning of his Dodgers season before he was good and then before he was bad again. But I'm with you. He feels like the line of demarcation between trust and don't trust. I would put him slightly over on the trust side now. And that might be because I've been hurt so badly by the Dodgers bullpen that my standards have lowered as far as what I trust. But Shelby Miller is in that group, which leaves us with 5 more names that we can rattle off quickly. Blake, I'll start with you. Yency Almonte, Perfect inning today with a strikeout. He gave up 4 earned runs his last time out, though, on April 26th. Here's fact. I don't know if either of you have looked at Yency Almonte's game log. He has given up a run in every other appearance. So it's gives up runs, scoreless, gives up runs, scoreless, all the way through all 13 appearances this year. An 8.5 ERA. He does have 5 strikeouts, though, Blake, in his last 4 1/3, which I know you're a big strikeout guy. I don't think any of us trust Yency Almonte right now. I'm just going to go out on a limb and say that. But give me your 15 to 20 seconds on where you're at. Like, have you lost all faith? Is this the guy that got DFA'd by the Rockies and was terrible? Or do you still see enough there to kind of believe in him?
I believe in him as a middle reliever still, I guess, kind of where I'm at with him. I want to see more of last year's from him, but he's just been too inconsistent this year. So I'm not going to put him in any high leverage spots, but I think he's too talented at the very minimum to just totally give up on him and move on. So you kind of just got to stick with him and see if he can figure it out.
Matt, that's where I'm at. The eye test with him is the stuff is still nasty. Like when the sweeper is sweeping and the 2-seamer is running, you can see why he was one of the better relievers on the Dodgers in the Dodgers pen and honestly in baseball last season. But I mentioned 8.5 ERA. Where are you at on Yency?
Yeah, I think he'll improve on what we've seen so far this season. And heading into the year, I kept saying like you have to expect some regression just because he was so good for them last season. So I agree with Blake. Like I don't know if he'll get back to that level, but I think he'll certainly eventually sort of stabilize and be much better than what we've seen so far. And I think real quick, I thought we were going to get through this entire segment with Blake saying he trusted every relief pitcher. That was going to be history.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think there's going to be more not trust than trusts coming up here. Matt, I'll stick with you. Vesia is next. 2/3 of an inning today, a hit and 2 strikeouts, but he had given up runs in each of his last 2 appearances. However, the strikeouts are racking up. 13 strikeouts in his last 7 1/3 innings. Does have 5 walks, has allowed 14 hits. So he's giving up tons of hits. He's walking guys. He is still striking people out, though. Matt, Vesia, I assume we're all in the not trust camp right now. Do you foresee yourself trusting him at some point?
Yeah, I think he'll get there. Similar to Yency, it's kind of more of a, I don't want to say a long-term thing, but yeah, the trust isn't there now. But maybe another 2-3 weeks, if he continues to trend in the right direction, I could see him being somebody that the Dodgers can put into high leverage situations again.
Yeah, Blake, what about you, Alex Vesia?
I think it's the same vote with Almonte. Like he's a really talented reliever, and he's been one of their best relievers for 2 years. He's just kind of in a cold spell. And today Dave was talking about the bullpen. Like he thinks it's gaining more momentum and just building up to being better. And it really focuses on Almonte and Vesia getting back to form because he believes in the other guys. So if you can get them back to what they were last year, then you have a great bullpen instead of just a good or randomly, sometimes good, sometimes bad bullpen.
Yeah, Mike M might be Blake's burner. He just said, I trust Vesia with the 6-run lead. That's like Blake is like, he trusts, that's the only situation Blake trusts a relief pitcher in, I think, is with the 6-run lead. Okay, 3 more names. Blake, Victor Gonzalez, 2 2/3 innings, 2 hits, 1 walk, 3 strikeouts, no earned runs, absolutely pounding strikes in his 3 appearances. We know this is a guy who made huge contributions back in 2020 and then disappeared into the minors for a couple seasons with some injuries afterwards. Briefly, 3 appearances for Victor Gonzalez. We buying up Victor Gonzalez stock, Blake?
I mean, he's intriguing. He was hitting 98, I think, a couple times, and his fastball velocity is up. I think he's averaging like 97 right now. Like he looks like a really good reliever. He's passing the eye test, but like you said, he's been very inconsistent. He showed that he was great for a year, and then he just kind of disappeared off the entire roster for 2 years. So we'll see if he's gotten back to that form and is just healthy now and there, but it's definitely intriguing, and he's passing the eye test.
Matt, let me ask it to you this way. If the Dodgers, need to make a decision and they've got 1 bullpen spot left and they've got to either option Vesia or Victor Gonzalez down to AAA on the left-handed side, who would you rather send down?
Vesia. I assuming that what we've seen from them so far is what their production is at the time that decision is being made. Like you and I discussed on our last live show, I think Vesia would certainly benefit from going to OKC and getting to, maybe iron some things out down there. And so, yeah. And I think Victor Gonzalez, I need to see more of it from him, but he's definitely somebody that I think is trending in the right direction.
Blake, if you had to choose between Vesey or Gonzalez, one of those guys gets sent down to AAA, one gets kept up at the major league level. Are you taking Gonzalez?
I was just looking at the roster to see like who I would actually option with this question, but I don't think I'd want to option either of them. I mean, I think Vesey has just been too good to give up on him right now and send him down. Like, yeah, maybe he'll benefit from a stint at AAA, but for 2 years in a row, he was basically their second best reliever. So
Yeah.
I just don't really totally agree with optioning him. I think he deserves the chance to keep pitching out of it. He has looked a little better recently. So I would probably send down Victor Gonzalez at this point just because he hasn't proven as much over the past 2 years, but Victor does look better. I'll agree with that. So
Yeah, well, the last name on the major league list, and I've got one more minor league name here, is Phil Bickford. The 3.97 ERA for Bickford feels like perfect. That feels like the perfect encapsulation of Phil Bickford. I'll give him this. He's got 15 strikeouts and 11 in third, 5 walks, 11 hits. So the whip isn't very good. The strikeout rate is good. The ERA is basically average. Matt, I mean, like, if Phil Bickford were gone tomorrow, would you miss him?
Yeah, not particularly. I mean, he's in the same category sort of as Shelby Miller, where I could, lean either way with it. And I think what makes the decision for me is what role he's being used in. I don't necessarily trust him for, late inning situations on a consistent basis. If it's one time here and there, just because, maybe Gratterall's unavailable or Ferguson or Phillips, whatever the case is, and sure. But generally speaking, I don't think Bickford should be in that type of role.
Blake, you a big Bickford guy?
I think he's the lowest on my relief pitcher rankings. I mean, he's another guy, like, he's the perfect example of what I talk about with relievers, how they're just so random. Like, when they acquired him the first year, he looked like one of their best relievers, and he was just dominating everyone. And then last year, he looked like a guy you could DFA and not care about losing at all. So I kind of just have him in, like, the middle of there. He's just a guy, basically, on the roster. Like, I wouldn't hate losing him. I have some trust in him, like, just to be an effective middle reliever, but I'm not, like, holding out for him to be a high leverage guy at any point this year.
Yeah, he feels like a solid middle reliever, but you're hopeful that your bullpen has enough guys that you don't need just a guy who's quote unquote solid. Again, the 3.97 ERA feels about right for Bickford. One last name on here, a guy who has been sent down, but it's Justin Brule. 5 innings, 4 hits, 1 earned, 1 walk, 4 strikeouts, a 1.8 ERA. Blake, is he last of all the guys I've mentioned? Is Brule last on this list for you?
Probably. I mean, they kind of seem to view him as an organizational depth kind of piece. I mean, I'm a big Rule fan just because he's a big Tom Brady fan. I'm sure anyone who follows me knows that. He's the Boston guy. But yeah, I mean, he's not better than any of the lefty relievers they have right now.
Jeez Louise. Is he still a Tom Brady guy? Just a big TB12, like just pounding supplements over there. Matt, Justin Brule, where are you at on him?
I think I just haven't seen enough of him, especially this year. I mean, I know, like, I agree with Blake. I think he is very much viewed as, kind of organizational depth guy who can come up for a week, 10 days at a time. But yeah, I mean, it's not that I don't necessarily trust him. It's just there isn't a big enough sample size.
Those are the guys I sort of feel bad for because he's probably in the bullpen of like at least 20 other major league teams for sure as a lefty out of the pen. And yet he's just the odd man out in the Dodgers bullpen that is like, hey, enjoy the frequent flyer miles from Oklahoma City to Los Angeles or wherever we are playing. So let's get to a couple odds and ends real quick and we'll end the show with some questions. Matt, you hinted at this earlier, so I'll let you explain. Miguel Rojas expected to be activated soon. Has Dave Roberts given us any indication of what kind of role he might? Is he going to be the starting shortstop? Is he going to be riding the bench? Where might he fit in upon return? Yeah,
so Rojas will make starts at shortstop, but he's not going to be the primary starter the way he was when the season began. And, a lot of that is just basically they haven't been able to keep him healthy. And it, frankly, goes back to spring training when he dealt with I think it was a calf, a calf and foot cramp at the same time. And then obviously the hamstring and the growing issues during the season. And so they're going to shift him to what seems like more of a backup utility role, which was kind of what they planned all along when they first traded him and then, made sure to sign him to the contract extension right after that. So yeah, Rojas will be back, but, kind of in a utility role and, maybe late game defensive replacement.
Okay. The second odds and end real quick, and Matt, I'll stick with you on this one. Trey Turner returning home to Los Angeles. You expecting some fireworks and a big standing ovation for our guy Trey?
Yeah, this one's going to be curious. I'm wondering if the Dodgers are going to do, any sort of like thank you or welcome back. I don't want to call it a tribute video, but something. I mean, he had some memorable highlights when he was here, and the fans, I thought, embraced him. And I don't know if there's any like real bad blood over him leaving in free agency, just because I feel like it was assumed by most of us that he wasn't going to be re-signed. So that'll be interesting to see what kind of reception he gets. I don't expect it to be at the level, obviously, of Cody Bellinger or even Kenley Jansen if you go back a couple years ago, but I think it'll be a relatively warm reception.
Blake, I'm firmly in the act like nothing has happened with a guy like Trey Turner. I don't think he was around long enough to justify. I mean, I know he was a great player and sort of a guy of substance around the league as far as reputation and MVP finish and that kind of thing. But for me, he didn't win anything. He was only here a year and a half. I'm firmly in the, hey, welcome back, Trey Turner, but we're not putting a video or a message up on the board for me. That's me. Blake, where are you at?
I kind of agree with that. I think they'll give him like at least a message, welcome back kind of thing. I don't think he'll have a video. But he was a good player. He made an all-star team. I mean, he was part of 2 playoff teams for them. So you got to give him some kind of love coming back. I'm just not going to like go all out on anything.
Do you? You got to? You got to?
Maybe just play one of his slides into home plate. Just let that play on the video board.
He does have his bobblehead proudly displayed behind me, so I'll give him that. The slide bobblehead was a cool one. All right, let's get to some questions and some comments. Throw those in the chat. We'll close out the show with those all caps questions at the beginning. That will help us. The first one is not a question, but it needs to be mentioned here. Oh, did I just lose it? Oh, I had a good one. Okay, I'll have to look for it. But oh man, it was a Blake one. Oh, this is gonna hurt me. It was so. Oh, here we go. Tom Brady, Blake, DFA Blake right now. So Matt and I agree on this one. That's a 2-against-1 for Blake. Blake, as our chat, the Dodger Blue chat will attest, has terrible taste in quarterbacks and football teams. Bama's fine. He's a Bama guy and he's a Patriots guy, which pretty much tells you everything you need to know about Blake. So, Blake, I'll give you about 10 seconds to defend yourself here.
I mean, he was the first athlete I ever liked growing up. My cousin got me into football, and he was a Patriot fan, and it just kind of stuck. And then you're pointing out Bama. I'm going to school there. In all fairness, it's not like I just picked them because they're good. Yeah. So, but yeah, Patriots were the first sport team I ever actually watched growing up, and they got me into sports. So I always got to have some love for Brady.
There you go. There you go. Has to have some love for Brady. Ederico, what's your projection for our team after a month? Is this a World Series team, a playoff team, or a buying team, or a lottery team? Matt?
I feel like this question, Ederico, has been in our staff chat the first month of this season. I view them as a. It's tough to say.
Let me rephrase a little bit, Matt. Have your expectations for this team dramatically changed up or down over the first month of the season?
I wouldn't say it's dramatically changed, but I have more concerns than I did going into the season. And like I've said before, a lot of that is, the struggles. I didn't expect them to be what they have been. I thought maybe like Outman would, not maybe take to his everyday job, but we're still seeing some of the veterans that you were really counting on to bounce back not quite do that, especially in the bullpen. But as we touched on earlier, like some of that is improving. So I still stand at, I guess, they're good enough to win the NL West just because it's tough to see like how good is the NL West, right? The Padres, I mean, look, like as much as the Dodgers have struggled, the Padres spent a ton of money in the offseason and they're off to, a worse start than the Dodgers. And so they're arguably in a worse position. So I guess because of that, the Dodgers could end up winning the NL West, but if the Padres sort of maybe hit some of their expectations, I think the Dodgers will just end up being a wild card team, which, we've seen that's all it takes sometimes.
Blake, where are you at? Have expectations gone up or down over the first month of the season?
I think they've gone down a bit. Like before the season, I had them as kind of like a 91 to 93 win team, and now I'm probably around 87 or so. But I also we talked about it a few times in the offseason. Like this was a very high risk, kind of high reward team. Like I think all of us said we wouldn't be shocked if they won 95 games or 85 games because that's just the nature of how their team was built. There's so much risk and randomness to their roster. So I think we're just kind of seeing the results of that early on. they're probably going to win like 87 to 89 games, which maybe is enough to win the NL West. They still have some doubts about it, but I think they'll be in the playoffs, and then that's all you really need to win the World Series, just get in the playoffs, and anything can happen. Like we saw it with the Braves. They went out and traded for a few outfielders that were struggling at the time, and they all started to hit like Babe Ruth and Manny Ramirez in their prime. So
Yeah.
it's just the playoffs are so random. Like you just have to get a ticket in, and then you can win, or 111 team could lose and get eliminated. So.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think the Dodgers, I agree. I think they make the playoffs. I think the Dodgers will be buyers of some sort. I wouldn't expect a massive Trey Turner, Max Scherzer type trade. But as I said, if you can get comfortable with Mookie Betts at shortstop, I think going out and finding a guy who smashes left-handed pitching and can play the outfield, I think I think that's a reasonable thing. So worth keeping in mind. This was a THP points this out that Alex Verdugo got a thank you video when he returned. So if Alex Verdugo is getting, although Alex Verdugo brought back Mookie Betts, so are we sure the thank you video wasn't, hey, thank you for being a good enough prospect so that Mookie Betts would be acquired for you? But if that's true, and I believe you, THP, that it was, then then there you go. All right, let's get to some more questions here. Jason wants to know, with knowledge of Turner leaving in free agency and the loss to San Diego in 2022 and Atlanta in 21, would you have handled the 2020 offseason differently, seeing our current situation at shortstop? Seager, oh gosh, this is Javi Baez is just waiting to be talked about here. Marcus Semien, Correa, etc. I'm going to take the question off just so that we stop covering up the bottom half of Blake's face here. But look, obviously they would have handled things differently given Miguel Rojas is playing serious innings and they felt so desperate that they extended him, right? I mean, I think shortstop is the position that if they could go back in time, they may have handled differently. I mean, the interesting thing to me, Matt, and I'll ask you first, like, I still don't love the contract Seager signed. I don't love the contract Trey Turner signed. So, I mean, maybe you try and extend one of those guys ahead of time in hopes that you can save some money. But even knowing what you do now, they were a Gavin Lux, torn ACL away from this not really being as big of a problem as it seems to be now. So I don't know. How would you answer this question, Matt?
If I had, so I guess if I had to choose from those options that Jason gave us, I would probably say they just should have done the Seager contract.
Yeah.
And I know he's on the IL right now, and that was always going to be a concern for him. But I think his skill set, because he can kind of hit for power and all that, was going to age a little bit more gracefully than Trey Turner. I think we were all in agreement that Trey's, once his speed starts to decline, that his value also then drops a little bit. So, all things being equal, frankly, even without Gavin Lux, tearing his ACL in spring training, I still probably would have just done the Seager deal to keep him at shortstop at least, for another 2 or 3 years, and then you can kind of figure it out after that.
Yeah, and you guys can take my word. Blake would have just given Javi Baez a 7-year deal at about $30-40 million, and that probably would have solved that one. So, am I right, Blake? Anything to add there?
Yeah, Javi Baez is no. I said it before. I'll say it again. I think they should have signed Seager. Like, even though he might not have been the long-term option at shortstop, like at the time they had Justin Turner there, and we knew he wasn't going to be playing too much longer. So you could have always shifted Seager over there. I think in fairness to the Dodgers, it's kind of unfair to say they should have signed Seager because they have Rojas starting, because it was supposed to be Lux starting. Yep. And like you said, then we wouldn't be in this situation. But I do think they should have kept Seager around. He was a homegrown guy. He was an amazing player. He was the World Series MVP. He was just like the type of player you want to lock up and keep in your organization, is kind of the face of it and build around it. I know they have Kershaw as the face of it, but Seager was like that next wave of that superstar player they developed, and he was the one that kind of worked out the best. Like we saw Bellinger fell off, so he wasn't going to be the guy they keep around, and Walker Buehler had the injuries, so who knows what he's going to be like moving forward. It was just Seager was like that guy that they should have kept as their homegrown face of the team for the next decade or so.
Yeah. Okay. Let's get to a few more questions. We're at the hour 5 mark, but we'll stay on for a few more. David asks, all I hear is that we need help at the plate. How about some more starting pitching? Agreed. Matt, do the Dodgers need starting pitching? They've got 4 guys. They've got Stone. They've got Miller. They've got Pepio. They've got Grove. Do the Dodgers need help starting pitching?
It's a little early to say right now. I think we need to see what you're going to get from Dustin May and Tony Gonsolin. I wouldn't be opposed if they sort of struggle, one of the two. I wouldn't be opposed to the Dodgers maybe trading for like a very good number 3 or number 2 starter. And that is more in mind of, once you get into the postseason, you want to line up, a pretty strong starting rotation, especially with, the offense we've seen has kind of been a little bit of a roller coaster. And so if that sort of continues, then I think you need obviously a little bit better starting pitchers to keep games close rather than letting them sort of get away early on.
Blake?
I would try and add a starting pitcher, but I don't think it's their biggest need right now. You have Gavin Stone coming up, and we're going to see what he has. And then probably down the line, you're going to see Bobby Miller and maybe Ryan Pepio come back. So I think they need an upgrade like at this moment from Noah Syndergaard, but they have options there. And I think they'll try and add one. I just don't think they're going to push for like an ace caliber player or anything. Like as Matt was saying, it'll probably be a number 3 type or maybe even a number 4 type.
Yeah, no, I feel way more of a need for a guy that can hit left-handed pitching and play the outfield. That would be my greater need. Dong has a food question for us. St. Louis ribs or baby back ribs? Going to try and ask a food question based on opponents on the Sunday stream. I Googled this in case we needed a differentiation here. St. Louis ribs are flatter and straighter. Baby back ribs are curved and shorter. Personally, I'm a baby back ribs guy. So that's going to be my answer. Matt, you got any thoughts here? No, my gosh, please, for the love, do not tell me you don't like ribs. I can see the look on your face. No way. How can you not like ribs?
They're fine. It's not that I don't like them. They're fine. I think they're extremely overrated. And so it's not a food. Like I'm not going to pick a rib over like a burger or a steak or something like that. So I'll punt this one to Blake.
I love burgers. Blake, for the
Blake
love.
If you punt this to me, Jeff might just walk off right now because I have the same opinion. I think ribs are overrated. Like I'm just not going to pick them over other things. Like I'll eat them occasionally. I'm never looking forward to having ribs.
Ribs are, oh my gosh. You'd rather have a burger? I love burgers. Burgers are incredible. But ribs? You'd take a burger over ribs?
Oh, absolutely. No, like I don't even look at ribs on the menu.
Blake, would you take an Applebee's cheeseburger over ribs?
Are they Applebee's ribs?
Oh my gosh. Oh, the fact that you have to ask a clarifying question. That's all I need to know. All I need to know. We need to salvage this. Oh my gosh. I can't. Craig wants to know, Matt, is Walker Buehler coming back this year? Change the subject as quickly as possible.
Yeah. So, I mean, they haven't said yes. They haven't said no. Buehler was at Dodger Stadium this weekend, and Dave Roberts said he threw out to, he was playing catch at 150 feet. He got up to 88 miles an hour. And so they're encouraged by that. When it was posed to him, like, okay, if he's at 150 feet, is throwing off a mound, next or soon? They've said, I don't really know about that. But again, like if Buehler does return, it would be in September and honestly, probably not stretched out to full starter capacity.
Okay. Blake, anything to add?
If you ask Walker Buehler if he's coming back, he's going to say yes. I think he even said it last year right after the surgery, like his intention was to come back this year. I don't really believe it personally. It's just the Tommy John rehab recovery timeline is too long. And I don't think the Dodgers are going to risk it for a couple innings of a reliever in September and maybe even October, especially when they're expected to get some of their other relievers back. They might have a really deep bullpen, so I'm just not buying it.
My goodness, I'm so shaken by the fact that neither of you like ribs and that Blake would rather have a burger from Applebee's, and we have video proof of it. It's unbelievable.
Over Applebee's ribs.
Oh,
like if we're talking really good ribs here, I'm not going back to Applebee's. I don't even like Applebee's. So.
I don't know. Sounds like you like it pretty much. You're curious about the burgers and the ribs there. So, all right. Well, on that note, we will call it a night. That's Matt. That's Blake. As always, we appreciate you folks joining us, whether it is via live on YouTube or Facebook. Thank you so much. We had a great crowd tonight, almost 200 folks. So thank you if you're watching after the fact on YouTube. Thank you if you're listening via the Blue Wire Podcast Network. Again, this is available as a podcast on Apple, Spotify, and Google. We appreciate you as well. We will be here every Sunday night at 9 o'clock, at least through the month of May. Starting Memorial Day weekend, we might be shifting the show a little bit earlier just because of some scheduling stuff on our end, but to be determined on that front. We will be back for some live watch-alongs this week, so mark your calendars. No more weird East Coast 12:30 Tuesday games. No more Apple TV games on Friday. We've got live watch-alongs on Tuesdays and Fridays over at playback.tv/DodgerBlue1958. Those are a blast. If you haven't checked them out yet, it's well worth your time. And then we do live post-game shows here on Tuesdays and Fridays. We've got video content throughout the week, Monday through Friday on YouTube. So subscribe and ring the notification bell there as well. You can follow Matt Moreno at Matthew__Moreno, at by Blake Williams as well. You can check out their stuff over on DodgerBlue.com as well. My name is Jeff Spiegel. As always, enjoy the rest of your night. And of course, go Dodgers.